Hello, and welcome everybody to this discussion about the possible risks and benefits of using artificial intelligence, AI, for philanthropy. I'm Felix Oldenburg, founder of and CEO of Because.com. Because is a startup that provides foundations as a service. Within 5 minutes, you can start your own online foundation. And I'm CEO of Good.org, a Berlin-based group of digital social enterprises. And these past 5 years, I've had the pleasure of serving as trustee to Alliance magazine. Welcome all. During today's session, we'll be exploring what impact the rise of AI will have on the direction and management of philanthropic foundations. To discuss all this and more, I'm delighted to welcome all of you, an amazing large number. I believe over 700 registered participants as of this morning. Not all will be here with us at this moment, but will have access to the recording. And in particular, I'd like to welcome the people and organizations thinking hard about these questions. With me today are Catherine Miller, Director of the European AI and Society Fund. Hi, Catherine. Karen Gill, Vice President of Operations at the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation, and Jonathan Waddingham, Managing Director of Lightful Learning. Fantastic group of people. Can't wait. A few things, though, before we begin. Chat. First off, feel free to say hello to one another in our chat on the right-hand side of your screen and post any questions there. You can also join the conversation on Twitter by tagging @Alliance and @Lightful, or using the hashtag Philanthropy and AI, one word. And subscriptions. Alliance magazine is fabulous. I tell you, everyone here is welcome to subscribe to Alliance, and today at a 20% discount with the code AI20. There's a link to do so also in the chat. I'll give you all a moment to do that. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Carlotta Chialastri, Head of Partnerships at Lightful. Carlotta, will you say a few words to kick us off?
Sure, thank you, Felix. Hi, everyone. I'm Carlotta, the Head of Partnerships at Lightful. I'm thrilled to welcome you to this talk on the intersection of artificial intelligence and philanthropy, co-hosted by Lightful and Alliance. Technology is central to our mission at Lightful, and with the funding support of foundations, philanthropists, and institutional donors, we teach and coach small but mighty nonprofits on how to build trust online, using essential digital skills and tools. We know that by supporting civil society organizations to have more effective digital strategies and storytelling skills, they can raise more awareness and funds for the vital services. Now, given our work, the emergence of generative artificial intelligence is something we're following with keen interest and engagement. We want to understand where AI can help nonprofits with their work, let's say, for example, saving time in their day-to-day tasks, or ways to improve their management of their relationship, all with the purpose of delivering more impact for their end users. But we know this is not straightforward. We're really clear that there are a number of risks and unanswered questions. So in speaking with our partners, whether on the donor side or on the small nonprofit side, we are actively discussing what the ethical and practical implications might be. Given this complex landscape, filled with opportunities and challenges, we're truly thrilled to have convened these great panelists today. We are excited to hear if and how AI can play a role to help unlock the potential of philanthropy and nonprofits in the challenging times we are in. So on behalf of everyone at Lightful, thanks again for joining, and over to you, Felix.
Thank you, Carlotta. Exciting, and thanks for helping put this on. Now, before we introduce the panel, we're running a short word cloud poll to really make sure that we are covering what you're interested in. And we're asking all of you, when you think of AI and philanthropy, what words or feelings come to mind? Do we have this word cloud tool here now? You could also ask ChatGPT to help you with this if you want to. I did. I asked ChatGPT what would be the good questions for a discussion on AI and philanthropy. But the script I was provided with was better. Let's wait a few more seconds. Amy, will you give us a signal on when we have something to show? to help guide our panelists on what the interests of our audience are. And by the way, it's lovely to see so many of you saying hi in the chat. Just really makes it more alive to know who's dialing in from where. You may see interesting connections. So let us know who you are, from where you're coming, from where you're dialing in, your organization. Okay, so again, when you think of AI and philanthropy, what words or feelings come to mind? Amy, do we have a couple of entries to help guide our discussion? Poll is now closed. Now some digital magic. The most used word is opportunity. Interesting. Well, I'd actually quite like to do this again after we did this conversation, because I know we've got some fascinating discussion coming up about the risks and dangers of. And then we have also distrust, yes. We'll just take a second to welcome the only participant I've so far seen from Germany, Bernhard. Hi. Good of you to join. Any more hints? Catalyst is my word, says Virginia Littjohn. Okay. Thank you so much. We'll monitor the chat for any more input. But first then, let's turn over to Karen Gill, our first panelist today. Karen joined the Patrick McGovern Foundation in 2019, and she served in senior finance and operational roles in other foundations at different points in her career. Prior to her most recent work in the philanthropic sector, Karen, you spent 20 years as deputy director and CFO at CDAC, a US community development finance organization. You're an active board member of 2 local nonprofits in Massachusetts, and you have an MBA from Boston University. Please kick us off.
Thank you, Felix, and thanks to Alliance Magazine and Lightful for hosting this panel. Clearly, it's a hot topic and one with a lot of interest. And aligns with the Patrick J. McGovern Foundation. Our work aims to leverage AI and data solutions to create a thriving, equitable, and sustainable future for all. Annually, we spend about $75 million supporting organizations that are deploying AI, machine learning, and similar data solutions for social impact across a range of our strategy pillars. So we give across a range of strategy areas, but always with a lens toward technology, AI, machine learning, et cetera. In addition to our direct grant making, we provide technical capacity building support with our team of technologists and engage with civil society to advance ethical, human-centered technology frameworks and policies. So we've seen our grant partners from small, scrappy organizations to large global NGOs deploying these kinds of tools. For example, the American Red Cross has deployed AI in several ways to gain process efficiencies and better leverage their limited staff resources, both in their disaster relief work as well as in work in their blood supply and blood collection. While the smaller Invisible Institute has aggregated data to advance learning, shape their work, and drive their impact for their gender violence project in Chicago. But we recognize that that same potential exists for some philanthropy. Based on what we've seen and learned, here are some opportunities that we've come up with. Using generative AI to build conversational mechanisms for grant applications and reporting. So instead of getting static grant applications or reports, establish a conversational interface that can help grant partners navigate how they want to tell their story and to get feedback on what resonates rather than rely on periodic site visits or occasional check-ins. There's opportunities as well to advance equitable practices in grant making by democratizing access. I know of many foundations that avoid open application processes because they're afraid of being overwhelmed by the volume of requests that might come in. That's something that we've experienced at McGovern as well. But thoughtfully crafted AI algorithms can support an open application process by scanning applications in a consistent manner and shortlisting the ones that have the strongest alignment of priorities and outcomes, and connect new grant opportunities to those that may not have otherwise been introduced to a foundation or philanthropy. You have an opportunity to restructure grant diligence processes and manage risk using AI to streamline due diligence practices, including application review, or identify better ways to manage financial diligence and identify inconsistencies between actual financial data and budgets, identify key questions, and report against a risk framework. Risk criteria established by the funder could identify higher risk organizations and allow to establish mitigation strategies for high potential, high impact investments so that they're easier to make. For longer term grantee relationships, you could share that financial trend data and share it with the organization and offer opportunities for more engagement. There's opportunities to identify greater impact opportunities in philanthropy for your own giving, using things like natural language processing to identify common themes across a range of reports or all the reports in your portfolio, and make connections among those reports and other data to find new ways to achieve impact or tell your own story of impact. Using themes to connect grant partners who may not otherwise make the connection. For example, you might have climate grantees that report on primary or secondary findings that could impact emerging treatments for chronic conditions or health disparities, or changing weather patterns that might impact agricultural business. We can also gain efficiencies in our own internal operation, deploying AI to automate repetitive tasks like routine accounting functions or investment reporting, particularly in organizations where portfolios are invested across many fund managers, using ChatGPT to hone phishing tests to better educate your staff, or use it to assist with a first draft of a paper or social media post. And there's also an opportunity to ensure that decision makers have real-time access to synthesized information and analysis. We see a lot of potential, and as the word cloud says, a lot of opportunity for AI and other modern tools to transform our philanthropic practices. We can accelerate our adoption and development of these tools by being intentional, perhaps also creating shared communities of practice or for sharing lessons learned and resources. Philanthropy is a great community for sharing, so we can use it here. We are optimistic, but also acknowledge, as has been said, that it has to be done thoughtfully and with a human-centered and equity-centered approach. Back to you, Felix.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much for this overview, Karen. Incredibly useful. Now, I think most of you have probably done this, used the typical AI tools, DALL-E, ChatGPT in your own work. We certainly do at vcos.com. And it struck me as a follow-up question that when I look for, you mentioned grantee research, when I look for the major organizations in a given field, I've tried genital mutilation and then ask for particularly impactful organizations, gives me the same result. Do we have a risk of an over-reliance on artificial intelligence, creating winner-takes-all structure, sort of everybody reproduces the same results essentially? What is your view on is it too early to tell, or can you see any impact of the use of AI on the practices of philanthropic organizations already?
And I think you have to combine the human-centered approach, and AI is good for setting up a framework, but there's also then the opportunity to apply it and take application that are unique to the circumstances. So it's a good starting point. It's a good sorting mechanism. It's good for dealing with volume of activity, but you still have to take the personal approach. It's not going to do everything, at least right now. And so you've got to really look at it together. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but we also have to be educated about it and take some caution as well.
So that will come as a relief to people in this call that they will still have that their jobs are still required.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's human interaction is important. You know, I mean, as I think about it, you know, the thing we also have to be mindful of, we've got to be educated about it, and we need to grow our technical capacity as a philanthropic institution. I mean, I heard recently from a senior technologist at one of the major foundations that philanthropy is at least a decade behind the private sector firms in the maturity of its technology practices. And so we've got to learn, and we've got to be educated about it so that we can use it and leverage it effectively. I mean, we need to know how the algorithms are written so we can do things like manage bias and ensure that the work that these tools are doing are yielding the results and analysis that align with our purpose and intent. So we've got to know, but we've also got to make sure that we know how to leverage it and use it effectively.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people in the sector, and you probably too, actually expressing pride in the fact that sort of technology, this is not yet technology driven. But how do you think it will change the practices though? Can you help us look ahead a little bit, working with grantees, handling funding applications, analyzing report, administering payments? What will look different in a few years' time, you think?
I mean, I think that first of all, there's probably already AI embedded in some of the applications and the tools that we're using. We use software currently for bill payment. We use software for evaluating our grant applications, our grants management systems. Those systems, as they're being developed by the technology firms that are developing it, are going to be using and developing AI solutions that are embedded in it. So I think we're not going to get around it. I think it's a question and an ability of how we think about embracing it to more effectively do the work. Like, can we use this to tell our story better, to have impact, and to be able to draw connections and connect big data. I think there are opportunities for us to engage as a philanthropy in data sharing and share our learning both as colleagues, but also with the field. And I think that is going to help us do more faster, do more better, and be more effective, so that we're not duplicating work, that we're really collaborating together to try to solve the work, to solve the issues and the challenges that we care about and the impact that we're trying to drive forward in the world. I think the other piece that's going to be important for us as philanthropy is that we need to understand enough about this, and we don't need to be technical experts, but we need to have a baseline of digital literacy and understanding to be able to advance them. But we're at a transformational period. AI is out there. It's not going to go away. These technologies are going to continue to be leveraged and used, despite calls to take a pause and everything else. Yes, we have to be careful and we have to be thoughtful, but philanthropy needs to be at the table as these tools are being deployed and used. I mean, as purpose-driven organizations with social impact and a lot of influence in the sector, we've got a moral responsibility to use our influence to advance ethical development and ensure that a wide variety of voices have input into the design and development of the technologies in practice. So not only can we use these tools, but we can be a force for good and a force for the kind of ethical advancement and the development that we want to see these tools have, and make sure that all voices are included in this work. And I think the combination of being able to share data, to leverage, to learn together, to build our own internal capacity, also gives us the capacity to understand the tools in a way that we can have the kind of influence to make sure that all voices are heard.
Thank you so much. There's a couple of questions coming in the chat. I don't know, it's probably hard to monitor them as you speak, but one or two stood out for me here. Could artificial intelligence help with reviewing reports and studies to provide insights to funders and help shape strategy? I mean, writing reports, reading reports, big part of institutional philanthropy, not the most loved part, perhaps not the most impactful part per se. Can we transform that? Oh,
for sure. I mean, if I think about all of the places where I've been, the exciting work is always the grant making, the giving, the interacting with potential opportunities, and reporting and report review seems to fall down on the priority list because it's the important diligence process. It's important to understand the work and the impact, but it's not nearly as exciting as new grant awards. And so it's a great opportunity to use AI to develop algorithms or to develop tools to be able to pull out keywords, to synthesize the information that's being provided, potentially even getting rid of reporting altogether in the traditional sense that we're accustomed to, and to adopt more trust-based practices, and maybe make it a portal that's interactive through the system that collects that kind of information, and allows for some dialogue and ongoing engagement for learning, and store that right in your system. So nobody's recording data or anything else. I mean,
exactly. Well, this echoes with what Marcus has been suggesting a moment ago. Maybe it's a case of changing the reporting process rather than handing it over to AI.
Could be, sure. But you can use AI as well to help that process.
Shall we leave it there, Karen, for a moment and get more perspectives of other panelists, and then we'll return to the more open questions. I think that there's tons in here that we could pick up on, but let's get thank you so much for now, and let's get the perspective of Catherine Miller. Catherine joined the European AI and Society Fund in 22. You previously worked, Catherine, as a in tech policy, as Director of Policy and then CEO of Everyone. It's a great name. The Responsible Technology think tank. And prior to that, you had a career as an award-winning journalist for the BBC, covering news and current affairs from around the world for TV, radio, and online. Catherine, really looking forward to your input.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the really engaging conversation so far. There's two things I want to talk about our work at the European AI and Society Fund, which I hope will help move this conversation to a slightly different space. So first I want to address this question of what is this intersection between AI and society, and secondly, what it's got to do with philanthropy outside of the kind of work that Karen was talking about, and more into where are we focusing our efforts and what are we doing our funding around. So AI and society, you know, AI, the phenomenal thing about AI is it's a general purpose technology. It can be applied in so many different aspects. And as Karen said, it's already part of our lives, often without even realizing. You know, every time we use map navigation or have a film recommended to us or spam is removed from our email, all of these are ways in which AI is already integrated into our lives. But the thing that gets people really excited about the impact on society is stuff like this. So the potential of AI to really tackle some of society's greatest challenges. So accelerating medical research, for example, or the United Nations tackling, you know, monitoring climate change through AI. That's the stuff that people have been dreaming about, and that's stuff that people have got really excited about. But there's a flip side, and that flip side used to be quite hard to explain. And then ChatGPT came along and has started to do the job for me. So ChatGPT is a phenomenal technical achievement, this ability to mimic human speech in an uncanny way. But it was launched into society without any real consideration for the impacts it would have on the people at the other end of it. And within weeks, you have a set of headlines like this. And this is really exemplary for the way that AI is designed and deployed in general. It's brought out with a lot of hype by its proponents without thinking about the people at the end and how they will be affected by it. And when you do that in a society that we already know is riven by social injustice, what happens is that those issues can be exacerbated and amplified by the impacts of the technology. So generative AI can create disinformation, and that is then spread across social media by algorithmic recommender systems, and that harms our democracy. Historically, racist policing practices are then embedded into AI predictive policing technology. Likewise, fraud detection algorithms and welfare systems present the same problems. If you launch AI into society without sufficient consumer protection, there is no redress when your vacuum cleaner films you on the toilet. When you launch it into a society without sufficient worker protections, those workers feel like the robots get treated better than they do. And when you launch it into a society that already has bias and discrimination, you find, so on the left, the Austrian employment system was offering women part-time jobs only. And on the right, the University of Amsterdam deployed a facial recognition system that didn't recognize Black students. And then when you roll out AI in the middle of a climate crisis, you find that it is spreading disinformation about that crisis, but also drawing huge amounts of energy and water to build and run the models. And so you see across all these areas of social justice, which are all areas that philanthropy has been traditionally involved in, AI is exacerbating issues that we already know and increasing those power imbalances. So why is this a problem for philanthropy? I mean, I would say historically, where there have been these kind of power imbalances and these injustices in society, philanthropy has stepped in to protect the vulnerable and to ensure that those harms are not perpetuated. If you're coming new into this subject, I can only recommend reading Kate Crawford's work as a really excellent introduction into some of these issues. But beyond that broader scope, there's actually something very practical that philanthropy can do just now, which is that here in Europe, where I'm speaking from, but in governments all around the world, they're trying to work out how to address these balances, how to create regulation. Civil society can be part of that conversation, can shape regulation so that AI is going to better serve people in society. But to do that, they have to be in the room. To be in the room, they need funding to do that. This is who's currently in the room. It's important to recognise big tech is now a vast lobbyist. In the EU alone, they're spending 97 million euros a year declared on their lobbying efforts. And for comparison, my grant-making budget is just under 2 million euros a year. So we've got a big imbalance there. And to take that on, we argue that we really need to sort of build an ecosystem. And that's what we're doing with our work through the support of our 14 philanthropic foundation partners. We're able to make grants to a wide range of organizations that cover these fields. And it's not just about building organizations that are expert in technology who can shape this work. It's about taking organizations who represent the communities that are most affected by the impacts of AI and bringing them to the table, and also drawing on the expertise of the social justice organizations that are strong in these fields to help them be part of that conversation. And it can work. I mean, these are things that are currently either have a tick against them because we got them into legislation in the EU, or have a question mark against them because we got them on the table and they're still under discussion. This is what the impact of bringing civil society into this conversation can be, and it really can help to bring the conversation forward. So I think this is a really exciting time to be part of this conversation. I'm so encouraged that so many people are joining it, but it's really urgent that we take this opportunity and really make sure that the needs of people in society are front and center.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That's really kicking us into gear. Before I turn to Jonathan, let's stay a few minutes with this, because I also see there's quite a bit of interest here to talk about the social justice and discrimination perspective. You talked about this imbalance of influence on tech policy. What can we do to change it? Is it simply a question of throwing more money at lobbying, or what are other things that people in this conversation might actually do? Have a perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, I guess I would say this, wouldn't I? But I certainly think that we do need to build up this capacity to have the civil society voice. And in fact, what I hear from policymakers is that they're desperate for it. They recognize that they are really being bombarded by lobbying from tech companies, and it's a total environment. It's, yes, it's the committees and the briefings, but it's drinks parties and it's fancy come and try on a new headset events and all sorts of things. They're really everywhere all of the time. And policymakers are looking for independent sources of information that they can draw on. And they don't have it at the moment because there's just not enough people with the skills to be able to be in that conversation. In the EU alone at the moment, apart from the Artificial Intelligence Act, which is a major piece of comprehensive regulation, there are at least 8 other legislative initiatives that our grantees are working on, all of which that have an AI aspect. So we need to vastly increase the capacity of civil society to address these issues.
Follow up to that, in recent years, we've had overarching issues like climate change influence to some extent the strategy of foundations actually working in other fields, recognizing that there are issues that affect all other fields. Do you see something similar happen in AI, or are you calling here and now for foundations to recognize that these issues about around AI, discrimination, social justice are so important that even foundations with other focuses of work should get together to provide that voice to civil society and come together, do something outside of the usual scope of work?
I absolutely agree. It's a horizontal issue. I think there are some issues like racial justice, like gender inequality, like climate, and like AI and other digital technologies that really sit right across pretty much any philanthropic work. You know, we're supporting organizations that work on health inequalities, that work on farming. You know, it's everywhere. Ideally, you know, I want to live in a world where the AI and Society Fund doesn't need to exist because AI is integrated into everyone's work. But we have a lot of catching up to do. You know, Karen said just in our practices, we're 10 years behind. In our civil society, social justice work, we're 20, 30, 40 years behind the industry. So until we're at a point where this has really been embedded, I think we need to have initiatives like ours and others around the world, which do this catching up process and bring everyone into the conversation and up to speed.
One more, because Tyler highlights something that's really interesting in terms of the imbalances between global South and global North. The last conversation at Alliance that drew so many participants was, in fact, in September last year, a conversation about decolonizing philanthropy. Do you have a view on North-South imbalances enhanced by AI?
There's a huge intersection between colonial practices and AI. So in fact, just in the development of artificial intelligence, you know, it's drawing on resources generally in the global South in terms of the precious materials that are used for computing hardware. It's drawing on precarious labor in the global South that labels the data and processes the data. And, you know, we're seeing technologies that are intended for the global North basically being tested on the global South as practice where there's even fewer regulations. The regulation that the EU is creating at the moment is potentially world leading, but it only protects Europeans. And it's leaving huge parts of the world unsupported. So, and the parts of the world which feel the impacts most greatly. So in the same way that I described AI exacerbating existing power imbalances in social justice, it's doing that on a global level between the South and the North.
Wow. Okay, so when you talk about philanthropy being behind in a technological sense of 10, 20, or even years in the area of the exponential gap, that's a lot of time now. It's more time than it would have been 10, 20 years ago. How to bridge that skills gap, that's, I think, what our next panelist will focus on. Jonathan Waddingham. Jonathan is the managing director of Lightful Learning, overseeing the design, development, and delivery of Lightful's bridge learning programs. Through these impactful programs, Jonathan's teams help nonprofits develop the digital skills and confidence needed to tell compelling stories, build trust, and raise more money. Jonathan's career in nonprofit technology has spanned 20 years, the last at Lightful. And before Lightful, Jonathan spent over a decade at the UK's leading online fundraising website, Just Giving. And he's a regular conference speaker on topics of digital fundraising, social media, and now being asked to speak about AI more frequently. Jonathan, you are focused on the skills building aspect of this, which many people will be interested in. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Felix, for that introduction. So as I said, I've spent 18 years working at the intersection of nonprofits and technology, and I've lived and worked through the rise and impact of revolutionary changes like social media, superfast broadband, and the rise of smartphones. Whilst none of these technological changes were driven by the nonprofit sector or designed for the nonprofit sector, they all made huge differences to our sector. And I think this moment we're living in is a change of comparable size, but it is happening much faster. So to illustrate this, let's cast our mind back to the rise of mobile. So back in 2010, if you can remember that far back, my team was working on a redesign of peer-to-peer fundraising pages at Just Giving. And I remember us discussing whether we needed to support a new subset of people accessing the site from their mobile phones. At that time, it was only 4% of people used mobiles to access the site, so we did the bare minimum. 3 years later, in 2013, mobile visits were at 40%, and no one was even asking whether we needed to support mobile views. Technology had shifted, and mobile was then ubiquitous. So the sorts of changes like this that previously took years are now happening in months. For example, it took Instagram 30 months to reach 100 million users by 2013, and TikTok took 9 months to reach the same milestone in 2020. For ChatGPT, it reached 100 million users in just 2 months. And it has barely been 6 months since ChatGPT launched, and I've never seen the technology landscape change so quickly. Not just with the rise of that tool, but with the numbers of digital products that have released AI-enabled features this year. So AI tools for customer support, project management, image creation, and it's coming soon to Google apps like Google Docs and Microsoft software like Excel and Word, at which point generative AI will start to become ubiquitous. In the same way people who build websites don't think, should we support mobile? Very soon they will no longer be thinking, should we use AI? Now, the profit-making tech world is driving this change, as Catherine said, and nonprofits will find it hard to keep up, which is perhaps one of the reasons you're here today. But even technology commentators whose job it is to keep up with tech are struggling with how fast things are moving. So at Lightful, we deliver a digital skills training program called Bridge. And I ran a session on generative AI tools a couple of weeks ago to introduce some of the technology and see how small nonprofits were using AI. Almost 90% had heard of ChatGPT, and nearly as many were concerned about the ethical considerations of using AI. Now, this is one of the main challenges with AI tools in particular, in that there are grey areas on what content the AI was trained on. Having said that, everyone in the session planned to use AI in their work, and they all thought it would help them. So there exists this tension between the benefits and whether it is right to use this technology. Now, as with all tech, the good and the bad depends a lot on how it is created and used, which for us is really the point of our existence at Lightful. We've supported over 2,000 nonprofits in 80 plus countries using digital technology, and we see AI as another tool in their arsenal. For us, this is a question of equity, as we believe that supporting small nonprofits to understand, question, and harness AI tools can help to level the playing field so that they can reach people effectively online and indeed offline. Again, now a key part of our work, and indeed one of our company values, is building trust. So we've been thinking very deeply about how we can use AI to develop our tools and services, like our Lightful Social platform. So we've landed on an approach that is not about using AI to generate content from prompts, which can lead to generic, shallow content that lacks context and understanding of different audience personas. Instead, it's designed to give useful AI-generated feedback on content a human has created, to help nonprofits craft powerful messages and learn what great looks like in the process. Now, we know that compelling storytelling and engaging content is vital for organizations to be able to build trust, fundraise effectively, and raise awareness about their cause area. At least, this is our view now. I remember first playing around with the GPT API in July 2021 and finding it cool and impressive, but not revolutionary. Like, I asked for ideas about writing engaging tweets for Giving Tuesday, and the fact it provided any content at all was enough to blow my mind, rather than the quality of the content. When ChatGPT launched, suggestions were better. It's still a little bland, but with ChatGPT 4, the newest version, content suggestions for the same prompt are significantly better, with the noticeable difference of adding related emojis to tweet suggestions. At this pace, and when AIs can be trained on your organization's data and tone of voice, it might not be too long before AI-generated text improves even further. But for now, it's very much in the first draft level of output. Now, for us, this approach aligns with our usual way of working on learning and doing, putting the theory into practice and helping organizations become more confident and strategic in their approach to digital. But it's taken us time and expertise to figure out even this first step, which is a privilege that many nonprofits and philanthropists don't have. So this is one of the reasons we're here today and doing so much research with participants and our partners to see how else we can help. So in our bridge session, we also heard examples of nonprofits using AI like an executive assistant who helped them save time by summarizing emails or meeting notes. Time that could be better spent on something an AI can't do, like having a conversation with a donor, or finishing that grant application, or delivering on their mission. Or perhaps their grant applications won't take so much time in the future as they can use a conversational AI tools, as Karen mentioned. Now, to sum up, I guess at Lightful, we believe generative AI tools can have a real and positive impact on nonprofits if harnessed correctly. Given the relationship between philanthropists and the nonprofits they fund, it goes without saying that what has a positive impact on the funding recipients has a positive impact on the funders. So for the philanthropists and foundations we work with to deliver our programs, we believe that investing in building the confidence of nonprofits in digital skills like AI can help increase trust and equity. So by working smarter, not harder, the very constrained resources nonprofits work with can be stretched further. So we're really excited to hear more today from other people thinking and working in this field, and from philanthropists to see what we should be planning next. Thank you. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you, Jonathan. Fascinating, and I'm sure you get a lot of interest from the group for the skills you're building. Very practically, I think many institutional philanthropy managers in this call may have the question, where should I start? Where's the biggest, the easiest to grasp potential, sort of the way the low-hanging fruit for potentially cost reduction, for improving a particular part of the philanthropic practice? What's the first? Give us some of the first steps to take, whether it's individual applications or fields of work. Where would you start?
I mean, I think, the first place to start would be ChatGPT if you haven't already, and kind of play around with it and see how it works. Because the first time you use it, it is kind of like magic. And that's, the way that app technology has been applied in a user experience perspective is very compelling. And I think that's, you ask a question, but I think some people have said in the chat, there's a kind of growing understanding that you can get much better results with thinking more deeply about your prompt. So thinking, instead of, write me 5 tweets about Giving Tuesday, it's like giving the ChatGPT some context of, here are 5 tweets we've done recently. We're trying to increase, fundraising. These are our audience personas. Now write us tweets that meet this criteria for these kind of personas, and in this style of voice. And then that will give it a much better context, and the results you'll get will be kind of much, much more improved. So I'd say to kind of look at that, and with ChatGPT, they have an image generation tool, DALL-E, which is good to play around with, which is not bad. But if you're looking for some of the more really kind of incredible uses, there's a site, Midjourney, that creates kind of really incredible images, and that's kind of being updated all the time. So those, I guess, would be the place to start, is to just try it. It's free, which is great, and probably one of the reasons why it's become so popular so quickly. And kind of take it from there and see how you can use it yourselves. I mean, for me personally, I kind of open it a lot to help with just some of those kind of mundane tasks. Often it's like copying some data from a spreadsheet and saying, kind of filter this or order this by something which otherwise I probably could do as a pivot table, but I'd have to Google how to do that. And it just saves you those, few minutes doing something fairly straightforward.
Oh yeah, pivot tables. Cool. Well, let me take it one step further before we open it up. Could you imagine that, thinking a few years into the future, almost all the aspects of institutional philanthropy could be automatized in a way? Could we imagine robo-philanthropy? Give a sum of money, put it on a bank account, and then have a set of tools to not only generate the calls for applications, but also review them, make grant decisions, and then provide you with an end-of-life report at the end of the foundation. Is that doable?
I mean, I think it's technically possible, but kind of with a product hat on, I'd say it's technically feasible, but I wouldn't say it's desirable, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily viable as a business, because philanthropy and supporting causes is an emotional thing, and so if you take that out of this equation, it's a very transactional process. And I think what we're trying to do in all of our work and trying to improve the world, fight injustice, bring more equity to marginalized groups, that's an emotional subject, and that needs kind of empathy. And I don't think we're a long way from having AI that can really feel, even though it may give the appearance of feeling, that it isn't feeling. So, for example, in our program, we have a range of we have a load of amazing digital training coaches that do one-to-one coaching with individual nonprofits. And sure, you could probably have a chatbot that answers a lot of the questions, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be with people that know who've been in that organization's shoes and kind of understand the unique pressures of a nonprofit, or a kind of foundation and how they need to manage their work. So I think there's definitely still a lot of that human element that needs to come into play. But I think what AI does can help save time on the things that are less value driven for you as a person, and enable you to, as I say, focus more on that kind of building relationships and the human part of the human-centered design, I guess, as Karen mentioned.
Well, brilliant. It reminds me of what bookstores and travel agencies and banks used to say. You cannot subtract the human element, and that leads us to the discussion, which I think is straight in this direction: ethical use, limits. We have a couple of outstanding questions and also already resources provided by people in the chat. So thank you for all of that. To all three of you, whoever wants to start, examples of ethical AI use policies on an organizational level, perhaps first of all. Do we see any philanthropic organizations or other organizations that philanthropy may take a cue from, implementing policies that foundation leaders in this call might look at for inspiration? A tough one to start with, rather than asking ChatGPT. Who has thought about this in their own organization and could help people in this call to understand where to get started? Any frameworks, examples of organizations who have thought about this deeply in their own practices in the philanthropic field?
I mean, I can just speak briefly to how we approached this when we were talking within our team and talking to our head of design and our engineers of like, what did we want to build? And our ideas were, we wanted to put some constraints in that we wanted a human to be in the loop. We didn't want to kind of take a person out of the process. We wanted to make sure people were learning and they weren't just getting fed kind of results without understanding why an answer was a good answer. We wanted to make it more collaborative rather than just sort of taking away from something. It's like, maybe a good analogy is, we're helping people to ask better questions, and instead of getting them from A to B, giving them a bicycle to get from A to B faster. That's how we approached it, at least. But I haven't really seen many other organizations publicize any AI frameworks they're using.
Catherine, Karen, on this, or otherwise I have a next question that just came up here.
I was on mute.
Okay, go.
I'm unmuted. I was starting to say that we've been talking about it at the foundation a little bit. The conversations are just beginning about data policies, privacy policies, but then, you know, developing these transparency policies about how and when AI is being used, so that users recognize when we have AI being used in a philanthropic operation, and then how we guide the ethical review and evaluation of the use of those tools. That you know, if we're going to develop it, this is going to be our approach in the way that we ensure that we're following our ethical standards and our principles. But I think that this may be an indication of philanthropy being about 10 years behind, right? You know, I'm sure that there are other private sector firms that have begun those kinds of policies, and we're launching those and talking about them now.
Yeah, thank you. There's, so
Uh,
Catherine, do you want to come in on this?
Yeah, just briefly, two things. First of all, I think it's essential that people create these policies, but please do not start from scratch, because there has been a huge amount of thinking. Even if philanthropic foundations have not done this work, there is an abundance of responsible AI principles. And also, if you look at other public institutions, so I'm familiar, for example, with the BBC in the UK has its responsible AI principles. Governments have principles around AI procurement often. Please go and start looking at those before you start with a blank sheet of paper. And then the other thing I would just say is it's very hard to actually create a practicable AI policy, because it's so hard to really know about the AI that we're using. So, for example, there is no accurate measure or public measure of the amount of CO2 emitted by different AI systems. So if you're a philanthropy organization that is concerned about climate impacts, you really should be thinking about how much carbon is being emitted by the system that you're using, and it's not possible to know that. So please do think about it responsibly, but also recognize the limitations of the information that we have to work on.
Yeah, good point. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, and also it's changing rapidly. So any set of rules, it already sounds so static, perhaps too static for what we're tackling. I want to highlight one more of the many questions that have come in. Matt Jackson asks, a lot of our conversation is about using AI tools to make the current system and ways of working more efficient, as opposed to how it might make us rethink the system. So wouldn't we just enter an arms race of more and more AI empowered same practices? Who writes longer reports, who writes more reports, who can put out more of the same, as opposed to questioning if we even need all of that anymore? Anyone have a perspective on how it would not only change how much we do because it reduces costs, but also really how we do philanthropy? For example, one direction that I'm passionate about is democratizing philanthropy. Why do we have so much of philanthropy centralized around in endowed foundations? That's a result of an organizational setup. If anyone could do philanthropy, what would that look like? But maybe you have your own thoughts about this. Rethink the system as opposed to just doing more and more of the same, cheaper, and with all these biases that we have discussed.
I mean, it seems that anytime you have something that, you know, talking about cell phones before, you know, now we've got another kind of technology that can offer solutions and offer opportunities in different ways than we've seen before. It really, in a way, it does present that opportunity. Why not step back and rethink or look at different options and the potential to be able to get the impact that we're trying to achieve collectively, to do it in a better way. And so using these kinds of approaches that, I'll just say, reduces the overhead for everyone, for philanthropy, and the organizations and the results that the organizations that are delivering the work and the results that we're all trying to collectively get. I mean, it's an opportunity, I think, to step back and ask those very questions. You know, there's a lot of movement and discussion and intention around democratizing philanthropy, about using more trust-based approaches. And if this is a tool that allows us to do that, then it's worth it to step back and look at opportunities to rethink it.
Thanks, Karen. That's almost like a summary statement already reflecting on this whole conversation. Then let me ask Catherine and then Jonathan for their, after almost an hour of conversation, what stood out for you? What do you take away from this conversation, or anything that we have missed that we should really have talked about? Catherine.
I mean, I think the first thing I take away is the number of people who are interested in this, but also in the conversations that we've had, we've spanned so many different things, and almost just like saying AI and philanthropy, there's so many parts to that. You know, how do we operate as institutions? What are the skills we need to have? And what are the issues that we need to focus on as a result of the impact of other people's AI? And I really think, you know, all of these things are deep and complex questions for themselves, but I think if you try and bring them together, when I look at the response, you know, thinking about what would responsible AI look like if philanthropic organizations are going to adopt AI in their own work, they have a duty really to think deeply about how they do it. I think one of the most depressing things I've read recently was someone at a trade conference saying corporates were running around saying, I've got to find a way to use generative AI in my work. Really, what is the problem you're trying to solve, and can and should this technology help you solve it, is where we need to start from in terms of our own practices. And in terms of the part that I focus on, really, let's recognize that this is a world that is being reshaped by a powerful technology, which is largely owned by powerful interests, and that we need to adapt our understanding of the societies that we work in accordingly.
Thank you. We're nearing the end of the conversation. Jonathan, your final takeaways or points we have missed?
No, I think I'm just going to be boring and completely agree with Catherine there. I think, you know, it's about asking the right questions, and I think sessions like this and the conversations that are spilling out afterwards, it's about finding the right questions to ask, and making sure that we are, you know, understanding the best way to approach this, and how you know, and thinking from that kind of human-centered design, what's actually going to benefit us, what's going to help us solve our problems, rather than, hey, here's this tool, how can we insert it? Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've definitely seen products where clearly someone has gone, right, we need to add AI, and we've just put it in here, and it makes no kind of sense. And so there is some deep thought, like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Can AI solve it? Can it solve it in an ethical way? Does it still respect the kind of lived experience, the kind of people we're trying to reach, the kind of marginalization, or the overgrowing causes? Does it align with the causes we're trying to change? And then that's a kind of a very simple framework to think, okay, this is going to be something that can help us. But, you know, it is a massive technology.
So really, both Catherine and you talk about problem first and then try to solve it, rather than sticking in the solution and finding the problem to suit the solution. As we wrap up this conversation, I'd like to invite you all to take a 5-minute survey that Lightful are running. The link is in the chat. It's to help philanthropists make the investment count, so they can help their beneficiaries use digital tools to build trust, tell stories, increase fundraising. By completing the survey, you're really helping Lightful to get a fuller picture of what philanthropists and their beneficiaries need, and you can win a membership to Alliance magazine. Deadline 26th of May. So I hope with the remaining 30 seconds, you will start to do that. And to end on time, I hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for giving us their time today. Karen, Catherine, Jonathan, it's been amazing. Learned a ton. Thanks to Lightful for making this conversation possible. And most of all, thanks to all of you for being here today and being part of this conversation. For those of you working in data within philanthropic foundations, Philea and Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo are running a survey to map out what activities European foundations are undertaking on this topic. Click the link in the chat. This also helps the field. Alliance's next event is on climate funding and data. And you'll receive a link to register for this in our next email. Thanks again. Until then, thanks for joining, and bye from Berlin.